Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for September 15th through 21st. This week I read 5 books, I watched 3 shows, and I listened to 1 book. September has been a fairly slow reading month for me, so a lot of the books that I read this week were graphic novels. Also, I just really wanted to read these graphic novels, so it was a good way to boost up my numbers, and as of this week I'm at 200 books read for the year. The first book I read this week was When I Arrived at the Castle by Emily Carroll. This is done in a very fascinating art style. It's blacks, whites, grays, and reds, and it was very fun to just flip through it and see that color palette. I believe that this artist has other books that are also in this color palette, I just haven't read them before. This one is fairly short and sweet, although sweet is probably not the best word for it because it is a horror graphic novel, so I'm not going to give anything away by talking about the plot, but I enjoyed this overall. I think the art style is really what sells it, and I would be open to reading more things by this artist in the future. The novel that I finished this week was The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. It just came out this week. It's one of the biggest Canadian releases of the year, so of course I had to read it. And I am helped by the fact that I was #1 on the holds list at my library, and because it is such a big release, my library actually got it very, very quickly. Usually I have to wait months for a book to come to the library, but this was not the case. As you might know, The Testaments is the follow-up to A Handmaid's Tale, and when I heard she was writing a sequel, I figured that she might as well just print money because obviously that was going to sell, especially with the popularity of the TV show, which I haven't gotten around to seeing yet because it's not on Netflix, and if it's not readily available to me, it takes a little while before I'll eventually get to it. As I picked up the book to start reading, I thought to myself, maybe I should have reread A Handmaid's Tale because it's been a while since I read it, but it wasn't actually necessary as long as you remembered the basic premise of that world. One thing that I did find interesting that I don't remember being confirmed in the first book is that Gilead is definitely the United States. It is talked about how this location used to be the United States and no longer is, and I don't remember that being the case in the first book. This book centers around documents by 3 separate people, one who is one of the aunts in Gilead, one who grew up in Gilead, and one who lives outside of Gilead and then later interacts with Gilead. That is intentionally vague because I don't want to give anything away. One aspect that I found very interesting was the characters had different names throughout the story depending on where they were in the time frame. Some of them had given names, some of them had names that were taken away and replaced by something else. Some of them had names that they didn't know that they had and then they reclaimed and decided whether or not they actually wanted them. And obviously this was an interesting read given the political climate and what we fear the world could turn into. Well, that's a terrifying noise. Next, I went back to graphic novels and read Princess Ever After by Katie O'Neill, and obviously it was adorable because Katie O'Neill draws the most precious graphic novels I've ever read. This one is about a princess who is trapped in a tower, and then one day another princess saves her from the tower, and then they go on adventures together. I plan to read everything that Katie O'Neill ever publishes because I love her art style so much, and I also love the diversity in her characters as well as the plots are these very quiet moments but also seem like these big grand adventures at the same time. For instance, I also read The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill this week, and this isn't a big exciting plot, but it has these little moments with these characters that mean a lot to the characters, not to mention you have these tea dragons, which are such an interesting creation. My library doesn't have the sequel yet, but I am on the holds list for it, and as soon as we get it in, I will be getting my hands on a copy. The final graphic novel I read this week was Artemis Fowl, the graphic novel by Ian Colfer. You might remember that I read this for my in-person book club, and on the day of that book club meeting I actually realized that this graphic novel existed, and since it had been a while since I read the book, and I've read many in between, I picked it up to kind of refamiliarize myself with names of characters and that type of thing. This was a pretty good graphic novel adaptation. It was basically directly the exact same things. One thing I really liked is it updated some of the clunky technology. The original is from 2001, and when you look at today's landscape we have things like the cloud, and he talked about backing up the photos that he was taking of the book to the cloud instead of this more convoluted type of thing that was happening in 2001 technology, and I really liked that it just cleaned up the little things like that. It was also fun to see some of the characters imagined because of course they used to just be characters in my head, and now I can see what somebody else decided a LEP officer looks like, for instance. This week we finished the 4th season of Fear the Walking Dead, and we thought that the 5th season was on Amazon Prime because the little drop down had 5 seasons to it, but when you go and click on season 5 it says it's not available in Canada, so that's annoying, Prime. I really don't like how Prime operates. It's hard to search and it's hard to get to what you want, and That was a disappointment, but I'm sure eventually it will become available. The way the season was put together was very different from previous seasons, and it was like that up until about the 10th episode when we found out that something that we assumed had not happened maybe had. Although it was something that was off camera, so I don't know if I entirely trust it. But after that point, we got to just a straight plot instead of going back and forth in narrative and trying to figure out what happened in the past to get characters to where they are currently. And I just wonder how that's going to go into the 5th season, whether or not we're going to have this much easier to follow timeline, or if we're going to continue to have all of these weird flashbacks. For example, one of the characters that we knew from previous seasons just showed up in the 4th season, and we don't know how she got there. How we found her again was never fully explained in any of those flashbacks, or if it was very brief. And because I tend to pay attention to these things, the fact that I don't know how they found her again is just a little bit annoying to me. I also finished the latter half of the 1st season of Pose, and here's the thing, Pose is available on Netflix in America, and I downloaded the entire 1st season of it to my phone while I was in America. So imagine how disappointed I am now that I'm back in Canada and Canadian Netflix doesn't have it, so I can't keep watching it. Like I mentioned last week, Pose follows characters in the late 1980s in New York in the ball scene, and it is just friggin' delightful. It's glamorous, it's glitzy, it's hard-hitting as well. These characters are so well written. I really enjoy pretty much everything about it, which is why I'm super bummed that I just can't watch the 2nd season. I'm going to see if my library has it, and if they don't, I'm going to ask them to buy it. And I'm probably the last person on Earth, but the other show I watched was the entire 1st season of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Yes, I had never seen it before. I had just heard other people talking about it, but I had never gotten around to watching it. I'm sure I don't have to explain it to you, but in case you also had never seen it before, it is a comedy that takes place in a police precinct, and for the most part, I really enjoy watching it. I have to turn my brain off every once in a while when it does things like fat shaming, which happens a lot in this season, and I just really hope that in future seasons the fat shaming goes away, because there was a lot of it and I didn't appreciate it. Besides that, these characters are flawed, interesting humans, and I like it for that. The book I listened to this week was City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. This is a historical fiction that takes place in the 1940s in New York City. The main character is a self-involved 19-year-old that flunks out of Vassar because she never goes to any of her classes, and her parents just send her to live with her aunt, who lives and works in a theater, and that was enough to hook me into this story because I'm a theater kid. It's a period piece set in New York. Apparently I'm just reading a lot of things that take place in New York right now. And then we have the glitz and the glamour of putting on shows during the Second World War. This entire book is written as though it is a letter back to somebody who has asked a question, and that question is, what were you to my father? We don't really know the person that's asking, and we don't really know who this person's father is until very far throughout the plot. It's basically a reason for this woman to give us her life story and the most interesting parts of it. Although our main character is a virgin when she arrives in New York City, 2 weeks later she no longer is, and she actually is basically on a lifelong quest to have all of the good sex, which is just something delightful to read, especially in a period piece novel about a woman. Originally this came on my radar because somebody, and I can't for the life of me remember who, said that if you like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, just push that book aside because this one is even better, and I thought to myself, I'm probably not going to like it more because I liked Evelyn Hugo a whole hell of a lot, but I knew that I would probably enjoy this one, and yes, I very much did. If you liked Evelyn Hugo, you will like this book. Assuming you liked Evelyn for the same reasons I did, which is the glitz and the glamour and the acting and the sexuality and all of those types of things. If you liked Evelyn, you'll like this one. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye.